Hello, my name is Marcelo Svirsky, and I am your lecturer for INTS 206 Methods in International Studies and Politics. These lectures will be uploaded in Moodle every Monday, starting from week 1. However, the tutorials will be conducted synchronously using Discord. Please follow the instructions through your soul's emails and also by looking into the announcements in our Moodle site. You may ask yourself why you need to study a subject on research method. There are several reasons for that. You are generally given with knowledge while you read or you even attend a lecture, but this subject will help you understanding how that knowledge that you read about is actually produced through research, which means to understand how research is conducted in the social sciences. A method of investigation is comprised of various aspects and dimensions. We will learn how to put together all those aspects and dimensions to form a rigorous method through which we investigate and eventually produce new knowledge. And also, in studying a subject on research method, we will help you developing a series of useful skills, not only for your essays and your research projects in university, but also once you join the workforce as well. For instance, in studying research method, you will be able to sophisticate your skills in report writing, how to collect data in a variety of methods, how to analyze the data you collect from different sources, how to plan ahead, and also how to critically analyze your findings. Let's have a look at your assessment task for this subject. In this subject, you will have 3 different types of assessment tasks: quizzes, a research proposal, and an exam. You will need to do 4 quizzes, which are worth together 40% of the final grade. Quizzes will be conducted online in Moodle. In terms of what you need to learn towards each quiz is simply the previous week's lectures and tutorials back to the last quiz. Quizzes will be conducted always on Monday in Moodle from 3 p.m. to 3 p.m. so that is you will have a window of 24 hours to do the quiz, but the real time you have to complete the quiz is 15 minutes. From the moment you start, you have 15 minutes to complete the quiz. You will be allowed only 1 attempt to do the quiz, and each quiz will be comprised of about 10 to 15 questions, which are generally multiple choice, true and false, short essay question, and so forth. Altogether, each quiz worth is 20 points, which are converted into 10% of the final grade. This is for the quizzes. The second task is to write a research proposal, which is worth 30% of the final grade. Altogether, the research proposal needs to be around 2,000 words. You will learn already from the first tutorial how to put together a research proposal. But the real first stage in putting together a research proposal is already to start thinking about a problem you would like to address that will stand at the center of your project, of your research. The research proposal is, as said, only a proposal. It is not the document that a researcher uses to actually conduct the research, but it is a document that proposes to conduct the research and need to be approved. We will learn that a research proposal should include a title, the research question, which is perhaps the most important part of the research proposal. You will need to write about the background to the problem that you are addressing in this project. You will need to write about the significance of this research, to do a literature review, to agree on methodology and methods, and obviously to use referencing system based on the politics style guide that you can download from our Moodle website. The research proposal needs to be submitted online on week 12, but I strongly recommend you to start working on this already from the beginning. This is a task that takes time to understand how to put it together. You can use always the tutorial meetings with your tutors to ask questions about the research proposal, or if needed, you can always email me. The third assessment task in this subject is an exam, which is worth 30% of the final grade. The exam will be conducted online on week 13, the last week of the semester, in Moodle. You will have 2 hours to complete the exam. The exam, in terms of the materials that you need to learn, is based on the whole semester in terms of lectures, tutorials, and whatever exercise and practices we will be doing. The questions themselves will be mainly essay and short answer questions. This subject requires 80% of attendance to tutorials as compulsory. So please be aware that you need to participate in the tutorials to an extent of at least 80% of the tutorials if you want to pass this subject. In terms of the schedule of teaching for this semester, we will be teaching learning from week 1 to week 4. On week 5, we will have a research week break, which I strongly suggest to use to work hard on your research proposal. Then we will have 3 more weeks of teaching learning, week 6, 7, 8, and then 2 weeks of recess in the semester. We are back with week 9 to 13, having in the last week our exam. In this subject, we have one main text, Alan Bremen's Social Research Method for the Edition, that you can find in Moodle. Most of our weeks are based in terms of reading in some of these book chapters. I strongly suggest you to read from week to week so you have a better grasp of what we are doing. In addition to this main book, there will be few more articles that I'm asking you to read during the semester. These will also be uploaded in Moodle. Now, this book has a dedicated website. As said, the book has a dedicated website or textbook support website. You just can follow the link in Moodle that I placed. and you will find a variety of resources that you can use as part of your learning in this subject. You have even some questions that you can practice towards each quiz, and various other very useful resources, including resources that can help you in putting together your research proposal and preparing yourself for the exam. So again, I do strongly suggest you to use this website. So what is social research? Social research is the systematic study of a social problem or topic. When we say systematic study, means that we need to use a rigorous method of investigation to understand that social problem or topic that the research is addressing. Characteristically, social research always takes into account questions of power and social change, which means that we are not engaging with a social topic, we are not engaging in the sense of investigating a social problem without any value in it, but we are trying also to understand how power relations work around that problem or topic we are addressing, and we always have an eye, if you like, on the possibility of social change in relation to that problem or topic that we are addressing. So you may even say that proper social research is always ideological in the sense that it should seek for some form of social transformation that will provide an understanding of how asymmetrical relations of power could be transformed. Social research is not having knowledge, some form of knowledge about a social topic. Neither it is having an opinion about a social topic. Again, it is simply conducting a systematic study of a social topic. One of the most important things to learn about conducting social research in terms of when we plan the project, when we actually conduct the data collection, and also at the stage of analyzing the findings and providing conclusions, is to avoid faulty reasoning, which is, in other words, sophistry. We avoid faulty reasoning by using rigorous methods that guide us in how to plan and conduct the research. In the following slides, I will show you a few cartoons and similar stuff that provide classical cases of faulty reasoning. For instance, in this cartoon, we see that the assumption is true, or may be true. That is, that every astronaut that went to the moon has eaten at some point of their life chicken. But the conclusion, on the other hand, is unrelated to the assumption, and it makes no sense in terms of how to derive a conclusion from that first assumption. This is an example of faulty reasoning. This is also another example of faulty reasoning. We have a series of assumptions or facts that can be checked, and let's assume that they are all truth, but yet there is no mechanism or rigorous method through which all these facts can be blended together and conclude out of them the conclusion that is offered here in the slide. Again, what is missing here is that research mechanism through which certain facts or data can be used in some way to make a legitimate form of reasoning and a legitimate conclusion. In the wrong hands, statistical data can be very absurd and can be misused to different political ends. So this is why when we handle statistical data, we need to make sure the source of the data, how it is presented, how should be used, and the context of the research of the project through which that statistical data was produced. Here you have another example of how statistical data can be misused. Obviously, in this case, it all depends on how many boys and how many girls are there in the class or the group. Because depending on the number of boys and girls, this candidate may or not have 51% of the vote. As it stands, as it is shown, obviously, this is wrong. Here you have a conversation between a marketing company representative, the woman, and the man who is apparently a researcher that came to conduct a sort of study for the marketing company. And they are discussing the different possibilities of methodologies and methods to be used in the sort of study that the company is asking for. And eventually, the marketing company representative asked just to do monitoring of social media, chatter, and cherry picking, and quotes that will fit the purposes of the marketing company, which is in reality the feeling that we get many times when we look at some reports or conclusions from companies that have allegedly used research methods in their studies. You will be aware during the semester of the differences of using the different methodologies and methods in conducting social research. But for sure, cherry picking quotes is not in any sense a way to conduct social research and offer conclusions. And again, you have here in this cartoon another example of how in many cases companies that all they are interested in is profit seek to use social research to confirm, to legitimize some conclusion that will benefit them. Here you have the conclusion should be that eating chocolate will make you look younger and thinner, and all the research you need to do is to just propose some data that can confirm these conclusions. So I think that this cartoon point is that many times social research recruits itself in missions that should not. We will discuss this point extensively in one of the weeks when we will talk about ethics politics, and research. So again, social research is an investigation aimed at answering a research question about significant social matters. Let's have a look now at four aspects or components of any social research. At the more structural level, every social research project have four main dimensions, aspects, or components, if you like. The first is the research question, which lies at the heart of any social research. In the research question, we will always identify a sort of relation between two variables or aspects of specific social problem that we want to address. I will give an example in the next slide. The second aspect is the strategy or the methodology of the research, which is basically the sort of philosophical approach to the research. This means that we need to decide on whether we are adopting a sort of qualitative, quantitative, or mixed approach to the research. The third aspect is the research design, which means basically the plan, how actually we are going to carry out the research. So this is about providing a framework for how we collect and analyze the data, including the scale of the research and also its schedule in terms of the time order within which we are going to conduct the research. And lastly, the methods. Part of any research is deciding upon which kind of techniques and tools we are going to use in our research. And this has to do obviously with the skills the researcher has and with their experience. Let us look into an example of a potential research question on potential research project based on this question. So the question in this example is, how are online users experiencing or addressing privacy issues on such social networking sites as Facebook and Twitter? There are a series of criteria that we always use to at first stage understand if the question and the research we are going to address makes sense and it is in reality worth doing. First of all, we will ask ourselves, is the research question arguable? That is this something that can be discussed in the sense of the context of actual social issues and concepts and social phenomena that we are living through? The second criterion would be if the research question and the research project that it involves is addressing a real social problem that needs proper investigation. Or in other words, is these problems that we claim to be addressing has social significance? Then we are asking questions more in terms of the design itself, to look into the question and think about the possibility that perhaps the research project that we are implying is perhaps too broad or too narrow in its scale. For instance, are Facebook and Twitter enough of social media sites to reach conclusions that can be used beyond the realm just of Facebook and Twitter, for instance. And another important question is if we are at all able, in fact, to research the question, to research what the question is addressing. Do we have the proper skills? Is there enough elaborated theory to address the issues associated with this question? Do we have the time and even the funding to carry on this research? So these are questions that we need to keep in mind, we need to address when we are drawing our first draft on a research question, which certainly applies to you in the sense that you are going to draft a research proposal, and these 4 questions that we are raising here are indeed very useful at the very early stage when you are drafting your research question. Now, these 2 arrows that you see in blue, in fact, they are pointing to the 2 variables or things, if you like, that are connected through the research question. If you go a slide back, you will see that I mentioned that in a research question, you will always find a relation between 2 variables that are connected in the problem that we are raising in the question. Here, these 2 variables are, on the one hand, online users, and on the other hand, privacy issues. This is what bothers us, if you like, in this research question, in this social problem that we are addressing. The privacy issues of online users. Then we fine-tune into where is this relation being addressed. In this case, Facebook and Twitter, but it can be also in another websites or forms of internet engaging. So you have here a connection between 2 variables, online users and privacy issues. This is the kind of thing that you need to create in a proper research question, connecting between 2 variables. We will see that these 2 variables have names. One is to be called the independent variable and the other the dependent variable. In what is left of this lecture, I will go through the 10 steps that comprise the research process. This will give you an idea of how a research process begins and how it ends. It always starts with an idea, identifying a social problem. Then we delve into the literature related to that social problem. Then we phrase the research question, the methodology and methods. We write the research proposal that need to be approved. We need also to apply for ethics approval if the research involves humans or animals, and for funding, which will enable the research to be conducted. At times, we need to conduct a pilot study. And finally, we engage in data collection and data analysis. The last step of any research process is merging all our understanding and conclusions into writing. The very first step is indeed how we choose a topic, an idea, a social problem that attracts our interest and we are willing to investigate. My inclination is always to suggest students to look into their own socio-political convictions, inclinations, and interests, and see which kind of issue attracts them to investigate, which kind of social problems they will be interested in researching, in understanding better. We also need to take into account the existence of social theories and methodologies that we are inclined to use, because this will be a part of the design of the research and eventually give the framework for us to choose the methodologies and the methods with which we will be carrying out the research. And a third issue that we take into account when choosing a topic or an idea is how much we know about it. If we are very distant from that particular problem or idea or interest, perhaps it won't be the best to choose it. Generally, I suggest that we should have some level of knowledge about that problem that we are interested in investigating. A basic knowledge that obviously can then be expanded. In addition, when thinking about an idea for research, something that interests us from a social perspective, there are certain practical considerations. First of all, the time scale. Is this a research that can be carried out in a couple of months or perhaps half a year? Or is this a research that will take us few years to conduct? The question of time is obviously related to the cost of the research, the funding that we can make available to us to carry out the research. Also, we need to take into account the existing literature around the issue that we are choosing and think if we are going for a pathway through which we test existing theory, or in fact we are trying to build up a new theory. Now, think that in any case, all social research is a sort of compromise between what we will really like to do, ideally, and what can be it is possible in reality to do. So taking into account all these considerations of time, funding, existing literature, we embark in a social research once we have choose a topic. And this is indeed the first step you will need to face when starting to think about the research proposal, your second assessment task that you need to submit. You first need to get an idea, a topic, a social problem that it is out there. And when I say social, by the way, I'm including all sorts of political, ethical, cultural issues, problems that interest us, among which we can choose one that we would like to research. Once we have decided on the topic that we want to research, the second step is the literature review, which means basically to know in a deep sense what is already known about the topic. This means a variety of issues. Firstly, we need to understand what are the theories that exist around the social problem that we are addressing, how these theories have been used to explain the topic, what are the concepts that build up these theories, and how they help organizing our understanding of the issue. But knowing what are the relevant theories around the topic we choose is not enough. We need also to understand, to learn what are the research methods that have been applied to the topic to research it. We need to understand and make clear to ourselves what are the main controversies around the topic, how this topic has been studied, if there are any clashes of evidence and contradictions in relation to the way the topic is understood. And also we need to have a grasp of who are the scholars considered the main contributors in the field in which the topic we choose falls. So taking all together, this will need to be expressed in writing in a section of the research proposal, which is called literature review. You will have your first tutorial on this issue of how to put together a literature review once a topic has been chosen. I am presenting the formulation of the research question as a sort of third stage in the research process. But in reality, we entertain the research question, the question that will help us putting together a research project from the very beginning, when we start thinking about a particular problem that we want to address in our investigation. Now, in principle, a research question should give a clear sense of what the research is going to be about. There are certain criteria we can use to check our research question, and I strongly suggest think about these points when you will start phrasing your own research question for your research proposal. To begin with, the question itself should be clear, that is, understandable. It can be read and we can understand what the question is saying. Secondly, the question we are proposing should be researchable. In other words, that the relation that we are stating between the two variables, the association between them, should be something that can in fact be researched. Now, in addition to that, the question we are proposing in the framework of a research project must have connections with theory and research already out there. So this means that I will have a framework, a space, if you like, of literature within which I can position my own research and try to find the right place from where to draw on that existing theory and research and help me guiding my own question on how to approach them. Also, our research question and the research project that it is pointed to need to give us a sense that I will be contributing to knowledge in some small way. So the project I am proposing need not to be repeating projects that exist or issues that have been checked, unless I am suggesting a new perspective and implying that perhaps a new form of alternative knowledge can be produced that will be challenging existing theories and understandings. And from a more practical point of view, in terms of scale, timing, the timeline of the research and the funding and the sort of issues that we are going to investigate, our research questions should be neither too broad or too narrow. You are going to have in one of the first tutorials a very focused practice of how to formulate your own research questions. So if you get to that tutorial already with an idea of what your research is going to be in your research proposal, that will be an excellent opportunity to try and phrase your own research question and try to discuss that in class. The fourth stage is the design of the research project. This is about choosing which kind of strategy or methodology we will be using, either quantitative, qualitative, or a sort of mixed strategy, and also the corresponding methods for the strategy that we choose. We are going to have a few lectures on this aspect of putting together a research project. At this stage, we are ready to put together a research proposal, which is basically a document that proposes a research project. The research proposal structurally, it follows how the research itself is going to be conducted. And we write the research proposal as if the research will be carried out. Now, in your case, you are going to write the research proposal that it is not going to be carried out, and yet you need to phrase it as if it is going to be conducted in reality. Assuming our research is about investigating people, we will need to apply for ethics approval. This means that certain special provisions need to be respected in conducting the research. For instance, when we are researching children, vulnerable groups in society, or traditional communities, there are specific ways of conducting the research, either if it's interviewing or following social activities, and we need first to ask permission and get an approval for the way our methods are being put together. This is in order to respect the people that we are researching, to make sure that we are not causing any harm to them in any sense, and also to take account of the power relations that always exist between us as researchers and the population that we are researching. In addition to the ethical aspect of our research, there is also the question of funding. Certain research topics are more likely to be funded than others. At times, this is because of the political inclination of the research that we are engaging with. At times, it is because of the availability of funds to particular topics that the sponsoring bodies are interested in promoting. But in any case, generally, we do apply for funding in order to be able to conduct the research. Funding is used not just to pay the time of the main researchers, but research team also comprise research assistants of all sorts, at times also translators and technical people that are part of the filming if needed, or recording. So for all these professionals and people that are part of the research team, we need to fundraise for the research project. Also, in cases that we need to travel away from the place we work, either within the country we live or overseas, we also will need funding for that kind of activity. At times we decide that it will be for the best interest of the success of the research project to conduct a pilot study. A pilot study is basically a small-scale preliminary study that we conduct in order to evaluate a number of things, such as the feasibility of the research project, how much we believe it could cost, its duration, some adverse events that can happen, and more generally, to improve the design of the research project before we actually conduct the full-scale experiment or the full-scale investigation. There are various reasons why we conduct a pilot study, like developing and testing the adequacy of our research instruments. As we said, assessing the feasibility of the study, and so on and so forth. You have here the different reasons why we should conduct. And as I said, overall, it is to improve the design of the project so we can be a bit more sure that our design fit the purpose of the research itself. So we finally arrive to the core of any research, which are, on the one hand, the data collection, and then the analysis of the data, of the information that we have gathered during the collection of data. Obviously, data collection depends on the methods that we have chosen to do the research, and the analysis generally is also related to the way we have gathered our data, our information, which will be the basis for our conclusions in this research. Now, these two stages are the stages that take most of the time in any research, particularly if you do qualitative research, but not necessarily. It can be the case also for quantitative research. For instance, in my case, that I used to do ethnographies, it can take several months to gather the information. After I interview people, I have observed them in their activities, I have collected documents in archives and other institutions, and then sitting down and starting to understanding all the data that I've collected, making sense of it, and eventually making statements that actually explain what we have learned in this research. And finally, we arrive to the last stage of the research. Once we have all these new understandings about the topic we investigated, we sit down and write our final reports, which can be addressed to the population, to the social groups that we investigate, to the institutions that we work in, to the sponsoring bodies. And in any case, a classical structure of a writing report for a research will comprise these dimensions that you can see here: an introduction, a literature review, the research methods that we use, the results, discussion, and conclusion. As you see, there are some similarities with the structure of a research proposal, but obviously in the final report we also include the findings themselves and our understandings of what we have investigated. Well, this will be all for this first lecture. and we will continue developing these themes and topics in the weeks to come.